Good morning and welcome to the quarterly board meeting of the Board of Psychology, California Board of Psychology. Before we do anything else, could we take the roll?
Bernal, Kasuga,
Present.
Cervantes,
Present.
Fu,
Aye.
Harbsheets,
Here.
Horn,
Here.
Phillips,
Here.
Tate.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you very much, Ms. Burns. As I said, good morning and welcome to the quarterly meeting of the California Board of Psychology. I want to ask all of us to please turn our cell phones and other devices to silent. You may notice board members accessing their laptops or other devices during the meeting. They're using these devices to access board meeting materials and not to play online poker, in keeping with our efforts to move to a paper-light, environmentally friendly process. We've allocated time on the agenda for public comment and will ask for public comment on each agenda item. I ask that you be respectful of our time constraints and the need to conduct and complete the board's business. If there are several members of the public seeking to comment on a particular agenda item, I will set a time limit on each speaker to ensure maximum participation by all. The board welcomes public comments on any items on the agenda, and it's the board's intent to ask for public comment prior to the board taking action on any agenda item. In making public comment, please do not identify any licensee or registrant of the board by name in order to avoid prejudicing future action that may be required of board members. I would like to call this meeting to order, and we will go to item number 1 on your hit parade. We've taken care of. I've given you the President's welcome. It's lovely to be here in San Diego. I think that's all I want to say on that subject. Is there any public item or comment for items not on the agenda? Seeing none, are we going to go direct to legislative from here?
Do you want to do the President's report?
Yeah, we can do the President's report. That's fine. I guess I'm up again. Number 4, the President's report. Let me just scroll ahead to get to the actual materials. You'll see at page 9 of the combined packet the board meeting event calendar, which shows the upcoming board meetings that are, as they're planned. I would like to mention to the board members in particular that in February, our board meeting, the day before our board meeting commences, will be the day that we make our legislative visits. This being our sunset year, it'll be particularly important to have as many board members present as possible so that we can make an impression on the legislature as to the importance of the sunset provision. But otherwise, I think the board meeting calendar and the legislative and the committee calendar is self-explanatory. Item number 2. Oh, that's still a continuation of the board meeting. Oh, that's for next year. You'll see the committee assignments for 2019. Those committee assignments at this point have not made a precipitous change. We are anticipating at the end of today's proceedings to have an election. Tomorrow, excuse me, at the end of the day's proceedings. Well, you're right. The end of 2 days' proceedings. We're going to have an election. That election will bring us a new president, and at that point in time, the president will probably be revisiting the committee assignments, the committee chairmanships and chairpersonships, and making a determination as to how we will go forward. But for now, I'm aware of no big changes. Just look here. I think that's it. Anything to talk about in the 2020 meetings except the legislative visits? Okay. Next up is the Executive Officer's Report. Ms. Sorick.
Good morning. Included in your meeting packet is the Executive Officer's Report. This is provided to the board at the quarterly meetings. We do have one update to announce, and that was sent by email to the board members. and that is that Miss Mai from our licensing unit is going to be going over to OSHPD, and she will start that new position this month.
What's OSHPD?
OSHPD is Occupational Safety
Office of Statewide
Office of Statewide
something or other. Health planning and something.
Health and well,
I think it's health planning and development, but
I think that's right.
yeah,
Yeah.
something like that.
Sorry.
Sorry. So yes, she will be missed. She's done a great job in our licensing unit as our breeze and licensing coordinator, and she will be missed. We will be posting to backfill that position, and working with the Department of Consumer Affairs Office of Human Resources to do that. Other than that, I don't have any other organizational updates for the board. Are there any questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next is item number 7, discussion and approval of the board's meeting minutes for the meeting of August 15th to 16th of 2019. Does anybody have any comments they would like to make on the minutes? I think some of us commented ahead of time.
Move to adopt the minutes with any technical amendments.
It's been moved and seconded to adopt the minutes. Any further discussion by board members? Any public comment on the board meeting minutes? Okay. Ms. Burns, would you like to call the roll?
Kasuga.
Aye.
Cervantes.
Aye.
Fu.
Aye.
Harbsheets.
Aye.
Horn.
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
Tate.
I wasn't here, but I trust everybody, so sure.
Motion passes.
Okay. Sorry, I seem a little discombobulated this morning. I was ill this morning. Item number 7, or 8, excuse me, is, oh, I'm sorry, I skipped over item number 6, DCA Executive Office Update. Ms. Sorick?
Included in the hand carry packet is a DCA executive update. It's going to be a letter that looks like this one referenced that is sent to my attention. It updates the Board and Bureau Services Executive Team update. Mr. Patrick Lay has left the department's Board and Bureau Services Division, and he has moved on to the Assembly Business and Professions Committee as a consultant. Mr. Lay and I met the other day and talked about our upcoming sunset, and he's very interested in continuing to follow the board as we progress through our sunset review. We don't have an assigned consultant on the Assembly or the Senate B&P committees as of yet, but it's good to at least check in with the requisite committees on that. So the director's quarterly meeting will be held on October 16th, and that is for board presidents and executive officers. That will be held at the Department of Consumer Affairs, and it's just kind of a check-in on all the different divisions within the department and updating the boards on any progress in any particular areas. DCA has put together a new publication called We're Listening, and it's ways to improve our interactions with the public as a department. And then the last but not least, the Future Leadership Development Program that I've been involved with in the past couple of years is continuing in its 3rd cohort. So that will be having its kickoff, well, it's had its kickoff meeting in September, and that will continue events and trainings throughout 2020. So does anybody have any questions about the DCA executive update? Okay, thank you.
Item number 8 is the budget report. Ms. Burns?
So provided is the budget report. The 2019-20 budget for the board is $5,231,000 with an estimated fund balance of $9,843,000, which includes our general fund loan repayment of $3,700,000. So due to fiscal limitations, they are still closing last year's books, and not a lot of our current expenditures have been put into the books at this moment, so there's limited information provided because there's limited estimates to give you. So you'll get a full budget report in February. So far, everything looks okay, a little tight, but okay. And we should be getting our budget analyst and I believe their manager to come to our February meeting as well to provide more in-depth information. So expect a more robust budget report and our budget experts to come and present with us in February.
Ms. Burns, when should fiscal be less problematic in terms of providing us what we need?
I would love to say give it a few years, like the Breeze system, but I'm an optimistic person.
So when you said the budget's okay but a little tight, what kinds of things make it tight?
A variety of things, personnel costs going up. Some of those things aren't adjusted until after the governor's budget. Certain things just don't match up in the same ways. We also, until they close the books from last year, that reversion is always an estimate because it essentially assumes we are expending all of our contracts, which we don't always do. So, we may have a contract for $10,000 for an item, but we only use that service a few times. So you don't always expend that whole amount. So again, they're still closing last year. So even getting let's look at last year's isn't possible at the moment, but it's kind of think of it like a ship riding. Like they're all working 7 days a week to close last year, and eventually they'll start all working towards the current year. So usually by mid-year is when we kind of have really solid, firm estimates.
So in February?
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's definitely something to say about the department and we can't provide you with things that the governor hasn't put out yet in his January budget, including budget letters and so on. So there's a lot of things that you kind of just have to wait. So that catches up with bargaining, contract increases, those kind of things. So.
A few months ago, we were notified of some increased costs that we would be charged as a department for various services. Is that reflected in this budget report, or have we been impacted by that yet?
We haven't been impacted by that yet because we're still accruing those fees. So the question will be towards the end, since it's mostly the Attorney General's office that the fees have gone up for. It'll depend on our usage. So we'll just have to continue to track that. We do have augmentation options when it comes to the Attorney General or the Office of Administrative Hearing fees. So if those happen to go up in any one given year beyond that, we can also ask for current year augmentation. So there are available options if that were to be the problem with a budget.
I know, Ms. Burns, that we're taking over some additional space on the second floor of the building we're in to better accommodate the staff since we have everybody squeezed into such a small space. How is that impacting the budget report? Or is it?
It's going to have a small tick up on we'll call it the remaining funds, since the other word is not what people would like to use. So the remaining funds, it'll eat into that a little bit more than we had anticipated, but it should be fine. So, again, it's all kind of a washout at the end, that bottom baseline budgeting that DCA likes to talk about. But there's kind of a few things that we need to wait for until the January numbers. That'll help everything else even out. So,
Is there any further board comment or questions as it relates to the board budget report? Is there any public comment? Seen neither, why don't we move on next in line? I'm just trying to. How long will the licensing report take, do you think? What's the stuff?
Yeah.
Or 10, 20? Should we stop? Okay. We're going to try briefly to do the licensing report. Ms. Chung, if for any reason we get close to 10:25, I know that the judge has requested that we stop by then to allow time for setup. So I may cut you off, and we may have to come back to you after after the shooting match is all done.
No
Okay.
problem. Good morning, board members. Provided in your materials, we have laid out our license and registration data by fiscal year. So since the last report at the board meeting in August, we have observed a slight increase in our population regarding active psychologists. We have about 100 active psychologists that are newly licensed, and then we have an uptick of about 20 psych assistant registration, and then a decrease in the registered psychologist registration. And we have made some enhancement to our report. I just want to bring your attention to the workload reports regarding the psychologist workload in attachment B. So you may see some the red bar that has increased, the number increased regarding open application. So there are two factors that contributing to that increase. So one is because we have made enhancement to how we run the workload report. So we have captured more data just to show a more complete picture for most data we could capture in the BREEZE system. And the second factor is due to we have made enhancement to the BREEZE system to correctly expired application, and then that triggered some applicants to reapply. So there you will see the increase on those applications, and that's the reason, and those are the reasons behind that. Other than that, I'm open for any questions if the board members have any.
So in terms of that attachment B, I just have a question. So when we talk about open cases, these are ones that are open applications. They haven't been determined yet. Is that right? Or this is how many have been open, and this is how many have been approved of those that have been open. Is that
so
how to read it?
So the open application part is it is a byproduct of approval of to take the EAAA exam, because how the system is set up. So it could be there somewhere in the progress for taking the EAAA, or maybe in the progress of taking the laws and ethics exam. So we will need to look at each record to determine where they are at.
Okay, thanks.
Any further board questions? Any public comment? We're now going to take a break for approximately 5 minutes to allow time for setup for the hearing on Dr. Whitaker. And so you have 5 minutes until we're going to start again. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I will open the record in the matter of the petition for early termination of probation filed by Paul Whitaker, Ph.D. This bears Office of Administrative Hearings, case number 2019-080698, agency case number 6002019-000579. Today's date is October the 3rd, 2019. My name is Deborah Nye Perkins. I am an administrative law judge with the State of California's Office of Administrative Hearings, and I have been assigned to sit today with a quorum of the Board of Psychology, which is convened here today to consider this petition. May I take appearance of counsel for the record, please?
Good morning, everybody. Rose Luzon, appearing on behalf of the Attorney General of California.
Good morning, Ms. Luzon. Mr. Whitaker, or Dr. Whitaker, are you here representing yourself today?
Yes, I am.
You are? Oh, yeah, thank you for putting your microphone on. Okay, so let me explain a little bit about the procedure today, about how we're going to proceed. As you know, this is with regard to your petition for early termination of probation, and as such, we're going to, the burden of proof is on you to establish that you're entitled to the granting of your petition. Typically, how these proceed is I'm going to allow Ms. Luzon to have an opening statement or preliminary statement with regard to the matter, and then I will, what I'm going to do is I'm going to, before I even do that, I'm going to mark documents for identification purposes, just for identification purposes only. I note that you have a binder in front of you. I presume those are primarily the documents that we have in consideration. If there are any other documents, I'll mark those as well. Ms. Luzon will give a preliminary statement, then I'll swear you in under oath. And I'll ask you a few questions. You'll, once you provide your testimony, then I'm going to allow her an opportunity for cross-examination. and ask you some questions as well. Once that's completed, I'll open it up to the board members if they have any questions, and then I'll allow each side a closing statement. Okay? If you have any questions with regard to procedure, please let me know. I'm happy to help as best I can, but I cannot provide you any legal advice. Okay? All right. With that, I'm going to mark documents. So I note I have been handed a binder here, and hopefully the documents will follow along generally with regard to the tabs that we have in the binder, but I also have some additional documents as well. So the first document I'm going to mark is under tab 1, and I note this is a redacted copy of the petition for early termination of probation. It is Bates numbered on the bottom right-hand corner of the document, AGO 001 through 12. I'm going to mark all of that as Exhibit 1. Under tab 2 is a notice of hearing in this matter. It is a two-page document, Bates marked AGO 0013 and 14, and I'm going to mark that as Exhibit 2. Under the next tab 3 is a certification of licensure. It is a single-page document, Bates marked AGO 0015. I'm going to mark that as Exhibit 3. Under the next tab 4 is a decision and order along with a stipulated settlement and disciplinary order, as well as an accusation attached. Those are all Bates marked AGO 0016 through 36. I'm going to mark that as Exhibit 4. Under the next tab 5 is a citation order from the Board of Psychology. It's a two-page document, Bates marked AGO 0037 and 38. I'm going to mark that as Exhibit 5. Under the next tab 6 is a citation order from the Board of Psychology, Bates marked AGO 0039 and 40. I'm going to mark that as Exhibit 6. Under the next tab 7 is a redacted version, Dr. Whitaker, just to let you know, documents that are received into evidence become public record. Accordingly, any information such as Social Security numbers, any private identifying information like that, we typically have that redacted so that they can't be used for any fraudulent purposes. So if you see anything like that that has not been redacted, please let me know, okay? So this is a probation report, Bates marked AGO 0041 through 45, and I'm going to mark that as Exhibit 7. All right. Next, tab 8 is a probation file memorandum report, and I note I also have a requested protective order for this document, correct?
That is correct, Your Honor.
All right, and this is a fairly lengthy document. It's Bates marked AGO 0046 through 225, and I'm going to mark this document as Exhibit 8.
Yes, Your Honor. In actuality, the request to seal is only with respect to specific documents.
Well, that's unfortunate because I can't put part of a document under seal. If I mark the document as an exhibit, the entire exhibit goes under seal, or only part of it. I can't put part of a document under seal if it's marked as one document.
Okay, I would then therefore request that the entire document go under seal.
Okay. Is there any objection? Obviously, you haven't offered the document for evidence yet, but I'm assuming you will. Do you have any objection to placing this document under seal, Mr. Whitaker?
No.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to mark the document as Exhibit 8, and we'll deal with that once we get to admission of
Sure.
evidence. All right. The next tab 8. Oh, so it's 8 and 9. Okay. So there's also, this document is also requested to be placed under seal as well.
That is correct, Your Honor.
All right. And this document is Bates marked AGO 226 through 250. I'm going to mark the document as Exhibit. Oh, great. Exhibit 8.
It should be 9, Your Honor.
I'm sorry, 9. All right, and then I have an additional document that is a notice of intent to introduce a declaration into evidence pursuant to Government Code 11514, along with the attached declaration of Stephen Ornish, MD. I'm going to mark that document as Exhibit 10.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Are there any further documents to mark?
No, none from the AG's office.
Dr. Whitaker, do you have any documents that you would like to have considered that have not been marked?
No.
No. Okay. All right. In that case, Ms. Luzon, would you like to provide a preliminary statement?
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you very much. We are here on a petition for early termination of probation that has been brought by the petitioner, Dr. Whitaker. By way of background, Dr. Whitaker was licensed to practice psychology in March 1995. In October of 2016, petitioner's license was revoked following the board's adoption of a stipulated settlement and disciplinary order. The revocation was stayed, and petitioner was placed on probation for 5 years in order to comply with certain terms and conditions of probation. That 5-year period will end on October 26, 2021. The underlying misconduct at issue for the discipline that was imposed upon petitioner was a DUI arrest that took place in November of 2014. It resulted in a wet reckless conviction. This was not petitioner's first DUI. In January 1999, he had a DUI arrest. On June 24th, 2019, the petitioner filed this petition for early termination of probation. It's been approximately 3 years now since the effective date of the disciplinary order. To date, there's a period of approximately 2 years that remains on the 5-year probationary term. As you know, the burden is on the petitioner to demonstrate clearly and convincingly that he is rehabilitated to warrant the relief of terminating his probation. So at this moment in time, I'll rest, I'll wait for the petitioner to testify, and subject to my cross-examination, I will provide my opinion and recommendation to the board as to the petition. Thank you very much.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under the penalty of perjury to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in this hearing today?
I do.
Okay. I have this information, but I'm going to ask you to state and spell your full name for me, please.
Paul Whitaker, Whitaker.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Whitaker, are you currently employed?
I'm self-employed.
Where?
I have a private practice office in Mission Valley and one in La Jolla.
And how long have you operated those offices?
My private practice in Mission Valley for the past 15 years, 14 and a half, and in La Jolla for the past year and a half. Prior to that, I was in Poway.
Prior to the, so 15 years ago, you were in Poway?
No, I'm sorry. Prior to having an office in La Jolla, I had a secondary office in Poway.
I see. Okay, Dr. Whitaker, what would you like to tell us today about why we're here?
If I may, I've prepared a statement I would like to read. Is that?
Well, okay. My preference is that you not read if possible, but you can if you can tell me what it is you want us to tell me. That's fine. Reading makes things a little bit difficult, but my preference is for you to provide it in your own words. Do you have a document that you've provided?
I'm sorry. I prepared a document to read, so that's the format in which I was prepared to talk.
Okay, well, you can certainly reference the document, but I'm going to stop you if it gets to be a little bit too difficult for the court reporter and for myself. As you can see, we have a court reporter here taking down everything. I'm also taking my own notes, and unfortunately, when people read, it becomes very, very difficult because you tend to go very fast, which can be a problem. But if you'd like to go ahead and tell us what you want to tell us, that's fine.
Thank you. If I can read, I'll do my best to read as slowly as I can.
Okay.
Thank you, Your Honor, Deputy Luzon, and the Board for your consideration of my petition for early termination of probation. I would like to present my case for early termination of probation so as to reassure the board that I am not a risk to the safety of the general public or to my psychotherapy clients. I want to demonstrate my rehabilitation regarding substance dependence, which entails my unequivocal commitment to sobriety and recovery for the rest of my life. I have come to understand, through my experience of sustained abstinence over the past 3 years, the profound and life-changing benefits that long-term sobriety provides. I was in denial of the need to maintain consistent abstinence at the time of my psychiatric evaluation on October the 8th, 2015, and for much of 2016 until I had my last drink on October the 8th, 2016. October 8th, 2016. I initially had the intention of being abstinent from alcohol in 2016, but while I did abstain the majority of the time in 2016, my failure to consistently abstain was clearly significant of my not doing enough to ensure sobriety. From January 2016 on, I attended SMART recovery meetings once or twice a week with a sincere desire to stop drinking. In the second week of July 2016, I attended a 1-week intensive outpatient program at Practical Recovery in La Jolla, a drug and alcohol rehabilitation treatment program based on the SMART recovery model. I was sober during the program and drank only on a few times until my final drink in early October of 2016. I am grateful that probation and the abstinence that it is unequivocally required has provided the external constraints that have kept me sober and in recovery long enough to resolve the denial that I could somehow be anything other than entirely abstinent from addictive substances in my life going forward. I started to feel that gratitude emerging in the spring of 2016 before my probation started in October 2016. I had not reached acceptance about my need to commit to abstinence without exception at the time of my psychiatric evaluation by Dr. Ornish in December 2015. I had intellectually believed I was ready to start on the road to recovery at the time, but my several lapses back to drinking in 2016 were indications that I had not entirely surrendered to abstinence. Since my arrest for driving under the influence, while driving through a downtown police checkpoint after eating and drinking at a restaurant on a Friday evening in November 2014, I've come to terms with my denial concerning the gravity of my misconduct. In driving under the influence, I acted out of accordance with my values of safeguarding and respecting the safety of others and myself, and of upholding my professional integrity. My actions stemmed from a denial and minimization of the risk involved and serve as a constant reminder to me now of how problematic drinking was for me. Painful memories of past poor judgment inform my current deep commitment to and understanding of the essential need for sobriety. Before I talk about my rehabilitation, I'd like to first clarify a couple of things within my case exhibits. Firstly, regarding my wording on the evidence of rehabilitation information sheet on AGO 0006. AGO 0006, item 6.
That would be Exhibit 1.
Exhibit 1, sorry. Within which I responded to the question, how do you think your action, inaction, or issues that led to discipline have affected patients and or family members? Upon reflection, I realized that my answer was incomplete. As I reread the materials, I felt my answer did not convey my understanding of how clients were still affected. First of all, because I was removed from 3 insurance panels due to my probationary status, I had to discontinue therapy with several of my clients. Moreover, given that my probationary status in the driving while intoxicated leading up to it is public record, if any of my clients have been privy to it, that may have influenced their trust in my integrity as a psychologist and a role model of healthy behavior and judgment. Although I don't believe my drinking substantially compromised my ability to be a responsible, effective clinician, it did make me a less effective clinician than I feel I am today. The conventional wisdom amongst psychotherapists is that we can only help others to the extent that we can help ourselves. To be optimally empathic and emotionally grounded with my clients, I need to be as fully connected to my own emotional growth and healing as possible. Drinking was an impediment to my being psychologically and spiritually connected within myself, as I have increasingly been in the past 3 years of sobriety. I would also like to comment about my 3 probation violations described by my probation coordinator, Curtis Gardner, in Exhibit 7. AGO 0044. The first 2 violations involved failure to check into the First Resource Solutions site for testing. The first of these occurred on April the 12th, 2017, 5.5 months after my probation began. That day, I had checked in 36 minutes late at 5:36 p.m. I had tried to check in several times beforehand that day on the Tracker phone app, but I wasn't able to log in. As the day went on, I lost track of the time and didn't realize 5 o'clock had passed. I take full responsibility for my mistake, and yet I hope that my check-in at 5:36 that day shows that I did not intend to avoid checking in, given that there would have still been 6 hours remaining for me to test if I had been selected for testing on that day. When I was alerted by my probation coordinator toward the end of October of 2018 of the second and third violations simultaneously, I was very surprised and distressed that I had allowed them to happen. It was disconcerting to learn that I had forgotten to check in on July 14th, as I had established a routine of monitoring check-ins on my calendar since the first violation that I thought was fail-safe and thorough. The fact that it happened on a Saturday when I didn't need to look at my calendar for work was a factor. However, in trying to understand how it could have happened and looking back on that day, the primary factor was that I was acutely worried about my mother's health at the time. I had learned of my mother's pneumonia after getting a call from nursing staff at her nursing residence. I remember being entirely preoccupied with trying to decide whether I should fly to Philadelphia right away. I was doubting that last-minute travel would be allowed on probation, and even if so, that it would be problematic to arrange on the weekend. I still kept thinking she might not be alive if I waited, and that I might regret it if I didn't go. I eventually managed to let go of my anxious worry, but for the entire day, I didn't realize that I had not checked in. My 93-year-old mother's health has dramatically declined over the past 2 years, and in that time, every vacation I've taken has been to visit her at her retirement community near Philadelphia. I have since come to terms with the fact that I may not be able to be there right before she dies, and I accept that I have visited her as much as I could manage. My third violation was the late submission of my third quarterly report of 2018, which was received 9 days late. In the first week of October, my scanner that I have used to scan and email my other quarterly reports was not working. Therefore, I decided to fax the report. Since I don't have a fax machine at home, I faxed the report from my practice office fax machine on October the 7th, the day that the report was due. After more than a week had passed, it occurred to me that I had not received the usual email confirmation of receipt of the quarterly report. I had hoped that this was because email confirmations were made solely in response to emails, and since I had faxed the report in this instance, there was no email confirmation. The fax machine that I sent was a new fax machine that my office suite had just acquired, and it did not print a confirmation either, as we had not established how to activate that function yet. So I emailed the quarterly report on October the 16th in the event that my fax may not have been received. After learning that my quarterly report had not been received on time, I have since submitted my reports early on in the week and made sure that their receipt was confirmed right away. I wish at this point to talk about my rehabilitation. Given that I had had previous DUI in January of 1999, I have had to do some deep soul-searching as to why I had not sustained a commitment to recovery from that time on after having been sober for most of 1999. After my DUI, I participated in a 28-day residential program at Hazelden Addiction Treatment Center in Minnesota at the behest of my father, who had been in recovery for alcoholism for over 2 decades by that time. I was primarily sober for the following 2 years with infrequent slips. By 2002, I had mistakenly decided that I would be able to sustain a pattern of moderate drinking from then on, believing that my excessive drinking in the past was largely due to the stress of my life with HIV before there was any long-term treatment available for it. I thought at the time that my having moved past my despair about an early demise would allow me to rely less on alcohol and cannabis as a coping mechanism. The progression of my drinking over the years since then belied that addictive rationalization, but for many years, addictive denial impeded my recommitting to sobriety. In retrospect, I know that I had not, as I had concluded in 2002, resolved the trauma of my HIV diagnosis. I remained largely incognizant during those years that there might be issues that remained unresolved. My thinking about my HIV status before the last 3 years was primarily about being grateful that I had survived with no HIV-related health problems. I have come to realize that emotional denial of this issue was a primary factor that was tied to the persistence of denial about alcohol dependence. Although I have mixed feelings about discussing my life with HIV in a non-confidential setting, I don't think I can adequately answer the question of how my mindset has changed in the past 3 years as compared to before that without talking about this key factor. I was diagnosed with HIV just after I received my doctoral degree in May of 1992. I had intentionally waited to be tested until after I had completed my doctorate because I thought the possibility of receiving a positive diagnosis would have added undue stress to the stress related to finishing my dissertation. My immune system was not suppressed at the time, and I am grateful that I have never had any HIV-related illness or medical problems since then. However, for much of the 90s, I was anticipating that I would become ill within a matter of a few years and would die prematurely. I have been fortunate to have an undetectable viral load since I started taking the life-saving medication that became available in 1996. A couple of years after that pivotal time, I had my first DUI incident in January of 1999. I understand in retrospect that I was still largely in a survival mode mindset, uncertain about my future for several years after that. I've come to realize that the trauma of anticipating illness and premature death for so many years and the subsequent experience of AIDS survivor syndrome led me to suppress a fair amount of emotional distress that I've been able to process and come to peace with more fully in sobriety. This has been one of the primary issues that I have focused on in my psychotherapy in the past 3 years. I have been in psychotherapy with the same psychologist, Dr. Archana Jajodia, for several years now, initially weekly and then bi-weekly in the past year and a half. Dr. Jajodia is an addiction specialist whose doctoral research focused on alcohol addiction. Her treatment approach incorporates mindfulness, acceptance and commitment therapy, and cognitive behavioral therapy. Mindfulness and ACT have been helpful in my learning to turn a direct, non-judgmental, and self-compassionate awareness to emotional distress and discomfort, with more acceptance and less resistance to the discomfort life can present, and less desire for emotional escape or numbing, such as with my past alcohol and cannabis use. I plan to continue with my own psychotherapy indefinitely. I have incorporated more consistent meditation and mindfulness practices into my daily life, which enhance cognitive and emotional self-awareness and increase stress resilience and overall peace of mind. I typically practice quiet mind meditation for 30 to 60 minutes almost every day. In addition, I practice mindfulness in many of my activities, such as cleaning and organizing, walking, hiking, doing yoga, swimming, among other activities. Meditation and mindfulness practices very much coincide with my sense of spiritual connection in my life. I was raised as a Quaker. I attended silent Quaker meetings throughout my childhood and adolescence, and more sporadically as an adult. We worshiped for an hour every Sunday, mostly in silence, in a manner much akin to silent meditation. Quaker terminology for our higher power speaks of the inner light, the inner teacher. We listen to the still, quiet voice within. In sobriety, I have reconnected with the still, quiet voice within to help sustain my sobriety. I do not wish for alcohol or any substance to ever block my ability to connect with the inner teacher within me. I received my clinical and research training at the State University of New York, one of the first and best cognitive behavioral programs in the country, and I have practiced largely as a CBT therapist in conjunction with other compatible modalities. The cognitive behavioral emphasis in Smart Recovery has resonated strongly with my understanding of how behavioral change works. I've been able to incorporate Smart Recovery in my life in a way that has led me now to feel confident in my ability to manage my life from now on in sobriety, in a way that has and will continue to engender my growth as a psychologist and a healthy, well-balanced person. The behavioral keystone to recovery I now know to be complete commitment to abstinence for the rest of my life, without which the essential cognitive, emotional, and spiritual elements of recovery cannot actualize. Through Smart Recovery, I have come to know many people and learned from their experience in recovery. Sharing with others struggles with alcohol and drugs and their paths toward recovery has solidified my dedication to an understanding of the multiple benefits of and potential challenges in a life commitment to recovery. I've also done my own extensive bibliotherapy, reading about addiction and recovery, and broadly related reading about psychological and spiritual health. Being in recovery, in turn, has enhanced my work with my clients, particularly those dealing with addiction-related issues, but also with my clients dealing with complex changes in their lives. I have gained in my appreciation of being present in my life without altering my experience with alcohol. I am more emotionally and cognitively aware and at peace with myself and with others, more consistently clear-headed and cognitively sharp. In addition to my psychological and spiritual health, my physical health has also improved. I've lost over 50 pounds. My blood pressure has been consistently within normal range for the past 2 years. My stamina for daily vigorous exercise, such as Ashtanga yoga, hiking, swimming, and weight training has increased. Although I have eaten in a fairly health-conscious way for most of my adult life, I have changed in the past couple of years to a diet that is largely plant-based and more optimally healthy, which has had a positive physical and mental impact. I strongly believe that I am ready and able to be released from probation from the Board of Psychology. I have built a strong foundation of recovery that makes me confident that I will remain steadfastly abstinent from substance use and oriented to healthier, more adaptive life habits. I no longer underestimate the necessity of continual awareness and steadfast resolve to abstain from alcohol. I feel fortunate that abstinence has not been a great struggle for me in the past 3 years. I believe this is largely because the values of recovery are congruent with my core values that are of essential importance to me in my life: mental, spiritual, and physical health, all directly related to my core value of professional excellence in my work as a psychologist. For me, abstinence and recovery have become solidly ego-dystonic or ego-syntonic without ambivalence. I acknowledge this with gratitude, and I trust sufficient humility and lack of complacency regarding the challenge that a lifelong commitment to recovery presents.
Anything further?
I know.
Cross-examination?
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Dr. Whitaker.
Good morning.
Dr. Whitaker, you agree that you're aware of the probation violations that you committed because a first citation order was issued to you by the board, as well as a second citation order, correct?
Yes. Yes.
And the first citation order was issued on June 6, 2017. The second one was issued on November 7, 2018. Is that correct?
Yes.
I'd like you to turn to Exhibit 8, AGO page 98 and 99. So you see, this is the quarterly report of compliance for the second quarter of 2017, which you signed and dated on July 6, 2017, correct?
I'm sorry. I'm 0088.
That's okay. It's Exhibit 8, AGO 98 and 99.
Oh, 9. I'm sorry. Yes.
And you see your signature there on page 99, correct?
Yes.
And you see also that you signed this report under penalty of perjury. Is that right?
Yes.
And above there you say that you are affirming that all statements made are true in every respect, right?
Yes.
Sir, by this time, you had received your first citation order in June of 2017, correct?
Yes.
And if you look above, 3 questions down on page 99, it says, have you complied with every term and condition of your probation? And your answer is yes.
Yeah.
Do you see that?
Yes.
So do you agree that that answer is incorrect in light of the cite and fine that was issued to you in June of 2017?
I do.
Please turn to same Exhibit 8, page 96 to 97. Sir, you signed this quarterly report on October 4th, 2017, and you also stated that you had complied with every term and condition of probation, notwithstanding the June 2017 cite and fine, correct?
Yes,
And this answer would be incorrect in light of that cite and fine, correct?
that's right.
Can you turn, please, to page 94 and 95? This is another quarterly report of compliance that you signed on January 6, 2018. Do you see that?
Yes,
And likewise, you also said that you complied with your probationary conditions, notwithstanding the earlier cite and fine, correct?
that's right.
And so that answer would be wrong also.
Yes,
If you turn to page 92 and 93, this is your first quarter 2018 report that you signed and dated on April 7th, 2018. And as you can see on page 93, you also asserted that you complied with your probationary conditions, but that's not correct, right?
that's right.
In page 86 to 87, you can see as well that you signed and dated this second quarter 2018 report. You dated it on July 1st, 2018, and you also asserted that you complied with your probationary conditions, but that's incorrect, correct?
That's right.
If you turn to page 84 and 85, this is the third quarter 2018 quarterly report of compliance. You signed and dated it on October 7th, 2018. And my understanding, based on your testimony today and the submission or the exhibits that are in the record, that your second violation for failure to check in with the drug screening program had occurred in July of 2018, correct?
Yes,
And notwithstanding that violation and your earlier violation, you asserted in this quarterly report that you complied with every term and condition of probation. Is that correct?
yes. May I add that I was not alerted to that violation until I believe the third week of October by Curtis Gardner, simultaneous with him telling me that of the third violation regarding the late submission of the quarterly report.
As of this date, however, you were aware of your first cite and fine, correct?
Oh, yes.
And so this would be an incorrect answer to that question of whether or not you complied with your probationary terms.
Yes.
If you turn to page 81 and 82, this is your fourth quarter 2018 quarterly report of compliance. Sir, by this time, the board had issued you a second cite and fine because that was issued in November of 2018. Is that right?
Yes.
And the date of your signing here is January 2nd, 2019. Do you see that?
Yes.
So by this time, you clearly had awareness of your second cite and fine, correct?
Yes.
And nonetheless, you asserted that you had indeed complied with all the terms and conditions of your probation. Is that right?
Yes.
But that answer is wrong.
Yes.
If you turn to page 79 and to 80, this is a first quarter of 2019 quarterly report of compliance. On page 80, again, you assert that you complied with every term and condition of probation, and you signed this report on April 3rd, 2019. Do you see that?
Yes.
And that's an incorrect statement about your probation compliance, correct?
Yes.
And lastly, with respect to the second quarter 2019 report, which is at 77 and 78, you signed that on July 3rd, 2019. Do you see that?
Yes.
And with respect to this report, you also continue to assert that you complied with your probationary conditions when you had not, pursuant to the two cite and fines that had been issued to you, correct?
Yes.
So that answer is wrong as well.
Yes.
Sir, have you submitted a quarterly report that discloses or states that you did violate your terms and conditions of probation?
No.
I'd like you to turn briefly to Exhibit 1, AGO 6. Dr. Whitaker, if you look down at question 9, the question there is, have you complied with all the terms and conditions of your probation? And you answered yes. Do you see that?
Yes.
So do you agree now that you had not complied with every term and condition of your probation and your answer was therefore incorrect?
Yes.
I want to ask you briefly about the 2 probation violations that had occurred with respect to your failure to check in. The first failure to check in occurred in April of 2017, correct?
Yes.
And by that time, sir, you had been aware of your requirement to submit to random biofluid testing, right?
Yes.
And you were also aware of your requirement to check in on a daily basis.
Yes.
And in fact, I'd like you to turn quickly to Exhibit 8, page 56. This is part of the probation file, and it is an email from you to the probation department. You are raising an issue about traveling out of state on December 20th, 2016, and you wanted to know how to comply with a testing requirement. Do you see that?
Yes.
Do you recall sending this email?
Yes.
And you sent it to the probation department, correct?
Yes.
And so you also, within your email, about 8 lines down, you state that you called First Lab for assistance to help you with this question that you had.
Yes.
And sir, if I understand your testimony today and the statements that you made to your probation monitor when he asked you to explain what happened with this login failure, you were having issues or problems logging into the First Lab app, right?
I frankly don't recall offhand.
I'll allow you to refresh your recollection. If you turn to same Exhibit 8, page 149. This is a letter under your letterhead, correct?
Yes.
And you sent this to Mr. Curtis Gardner, who is your probation coordinator, on May 31st, 2017, correct?
Yes.
And this is in regards to the failure to check in issue that happened on April 12th, 2017. Do you see that?
Yes.
And the first line states, on that morning, quote, I attempted to log into the First Lab Recovery Tracker app on my phone, as I do every morning, without success. This was the only time I had tried to log in on my phone where the login was not feasible. Do you see that?
Yes.
My question to you, sir, is you had previously notified the probation department when you had an issue about traveling out of state and locating a testing site. This time around, why did you not contact your probation monitor to let him know that you had login issues?
On April the 12th?
Correct.
Because I was just having a busy day, it didn't occur to me. I assumed, yeah, I shouldn't, but my thinking was that at some point it would start to work, that it was just some kind of fluke, and eventually I'd be able to log in.
And sir, did you think about, as you had done before, contacting First Lab, the drug screening program, for guidance about their app?
No, I did not.
As part of your response to probation monitor Gardner, second paragraph of page 149, you actually set forth a plan, an action plan for being able to ensure future compliance, correct?
Yes.
And notwithstanding that action plan, you failed to check in a year later in July of 2018, is that right?
Yes.
Earlier you said that you were preoccupied with your mother's health, is that right?
Yes.
You had subsequently been alerted as to this violation by the probation monitor when he asked you about this on October 25th, 2018, and that's reflected on page 143 if you want to refer to that. As you can see, on October 25th, there's reference to July 14th, 2018 at the top, and it states, "It appears you did not check into First Source. Do you have proof that shows otherwise?" Do you see that, sir?
Yes.
And then the page earlier is 142. You have an email response on October 27th. Do you see that?
Yes.
You address the specific question in the second paragraph, and you say, quote, "Regarding the check-in on July 14th, I am surprised to hear that the system indicates that I did not check in." Do you see that?
Yes.
So I guess my question to you is, sir, as you sit here today, did you or did you not check in?
I don't think I did check in, no. I said I'm surprised because I was just surprised to find that out. I wasn't trying to contest that I failed to check in.
Did you attempt to contact First Lab or follow up with your probation monitor to get clarification on this issue in light of your surprise?
Well, no, I think I just took his, I just assumed that he was correct. I mean, that it was, I mean, given that it's such a rare occurrence, I sort of believed that I had a fair amount of faith in the system working. So when he told me that I hadn't checked in, I just assumed that was the case.
I want to ask you about the late third quarter 2018 report that you submitted. You talked about that earlier, sir, and you had said that there was an issue with fax confirmation sheet not having one and therefore not having corroboration that you had faxed it on the day that it was due. Is that right?
Yes.
I want to get a little bit of clarification because you said something a little differently on page 143. On page 143, at the very bottom, you are writing to the probation monitor in response to him receiving your submission of your report via email a few days late. And in this email, you said to him, quote, "I faxed the report on October 7th because I wasn't able to use my scanner to email it as I usually do." So in that instance, you were having another technical issue, correct?
I'm not, what's the initial one that you're referring to?
Let me rephrase. In this instance, you were having a technical issue with your scanner, is that right?
That's right. The same one I believe that we've been discussing.
Did you notify your probation monitor on the day that it was due, knowing that it was due on that date, that you were having technical difficulties?
No, because I assumed that the fax would have gone through, which was obviously not a good assumption.
But you made that assumption knowing that you had no fax confirmation sheets, is that right?
That's right.
And knowing that you did not have any fax confirmation sheets, did you bother to contact your probation monitor to notify him that you had faxed it?
No.
You assumed that it was successfully faxed, but you didn't make any attempt to confirm it. Is that right?
That's right.
I want to get a little bit of a better understanding, sir, of your sobriety date. You indicated this morning that your sobriety date would be October 8, 2016. Is that correct?
Yes.
Since then, you haven't had any lapses?
No.
Prior to that date, when did you last drink alcohol?
Prior to the 8th of October, it would have been, I went to a wedding in the last week of September. My cousin got married. My cousin's son got married.
So that would have been the last week of September 2016?
Or the second to last. It was around the 21st of September, I believe.
How much did you drink on that occasion?
I had a few glasses of wine.
By few, do you mean 5?
No, I would say 3, probably. 3.
Did you have any liquor?
No.
And so on that date, you only had roughly 3 glasses of wine.
Yes.
How did you get to the event?
I was with my cousin. We were in France. She was driving. We drove.
You didn't drive?
My cousin drove.
Sir, if you can turn briefly to Exhibit 1, page 4. This is part of your petition. Excuse me, Exhibit 1, page... Oh, excuse me, page 6. My apologies. And page 6, question 8. The question is, what assurances can you provide the board that you will not reoffend? And you indicate on this page that you, quote, stopped drinking 39 months ago, correct?
32.
Excuse me, 32 months ago. Mm-hmm. And so I'm looking at the next page, which is when you signed and dated your petition the authorization for release of records. And it looks like 6... Oh, excuse me, page 4. Page 4 is when you signed and dated the petition, and that's June 8th, 2019. Do you see that?
Yes.
So if my calculation is correct, it sounds to me that you, at that time, when you asserted the 32 months, considered your sobriety date about October of 2016, right?
Yes.
And that's consistent with what you've testified today, correct?
Yes.
And sir, the effective date of your probation was October 27, 2016. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes.
So essentially, you've been sober while you've been on probation.
Yes.
What's your longest period of sobriety prior to this time period that you've been on probation?
In my adult life, yeah.
In your adult life, correct?
Yeah, okay. 7 months. That would be, no, more than, oh, yeah. Yeah, sobriety, 7 months, that's right, in 1999.
And that was after your first DUI, correct?
Yes.
After you had gone to the Hazleton Treatment Center?
I started before, but during and before, during, and after.
So if I understand your testimony correctly, up to now, until the start of your probation, until your sobriety date of October 8th, 2016, your longest period of sobriety has been 7 months.
Yes.
After your second DUI, you continued to drink, correct?
Yes.
I'd like you to turn to Exhibit 9, page 226. This is a report that was generated in connection with the investigation of your underlying accusation case. And it's a report that was provided by Dr. Stephen Ornish, dated February 10th, 2016. In connection with this report, you had met with Dr. Ornish on December 28th, 2015, correct?
Yes.
You recall having met with him?
Yes.
And if you turn to page 228 to 229, the last full paragraph in particular, Dr. Ornish asks you about your drinking pattern as of that time, and you said that you were drinking primarily on weekends, typically 1 to 3 glasses of wine on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday nights. Did you see that?
Yes.
And then if you turn to the next page, when you were asked if you drank more than that, you replied, on occasion. Do you see that, sir?
Yes.
During this time, you had your DUI conviction already, right?
Yes.
And as part of your probationary requirements for your criminal case, were you required also to attend AA meetings?
Yes.
And so you were on probation criminally, you were attending AA meetings, and you still had not abstained from alcohol, is that right?
No. I'm sorry, the dates are getting, I certainly did not drink during probation.
Criminal probation.
Oh, okay, you mean, yeah, after the DUI, yes.
Correct, because your DUI conviction was February 2015, is that right?
That's right.
You met with Dr. Ornish in December of 2015.
That's right.
And at that time, he asked you about your present drinking pattern, and you had said, I drink about 1 to 3 glasses of wine, correct?
Yes.
And at that time, you were going to AA?
Yes.
And you were still drinking?
Yes. Yeah. Not, I would say off and on. I mean, I was attempting abstinence, but not consistently. I mean, I was not abstinent.
You were not abstinent consistently, but you were attempting it sometimes?
Yeah, I know that's half measures, but I'm saying that I was aware that I needed to stop, that would be the ideal, that should have been happening.
So for example, sir, if you can turn to page 232 of the same exhibit. You had, in the middle part of this discussion with Dr. Ornish, you were discussing your thoughts about stopping drinking altogether during that time frame, correct?
Yes.
And during the time frame, just about when you were meeting with Dr. Ornish, you had been on a 1-week vacation, is that right?
Yes.
And despite thinking about stopping drinking around that time, you had made a decision against it, and you decided to drink, is that right?
Yes.
In fact, you state, quote, well, I think that I first thought about not drinking during the holiday, and then I thought, I don't think that's what I want to do. I'm on vacation, so I'll have wine with dinner, and so I did. And then after my vacation was over, I would commit to abstinence. Are those your words?
Yes.
If you turn to page 231, which is the page before, at the top, Dr. Ornish asks you about the Aaa Abstinence Model. Do you see that?
Yes.
And he asks you what your reason was for not ascribing to that abstinence model. And your response is, quote, well, I believe I can moderate my drinking. Do you see that?
Yes.
Do you believe that today?
No.
Why?
I certainly think I was in denial at that period when in this interview. It seems like a different person, frankly, from who I am today or how I think. I think the denial and minimization of addiction is a baffling thing. It is clearly not clear thinking. I don't think. I look back at this sort of thing and I'm confirmed as to why I don't drink anymore. This kind of ambivalence is very very uncommitted.
That's not you today, is that what you're saying?
That's right.
You talked earlier about 2016, which sounded like a big year for you with respect to your sobriety. But prior to having your last drink on October 8th, 2016, you also stated that you had, quote, several lapses. Can you describe for the board what those lapses mean?
Well, I know that several times, sort of over that sort of 8-month period, I drank on occasion. So that involved generally drinking some wine in the evening and some ambivalence about it. Regret certainly followed each lapse.
Approximately how many lapses did you have?
I'm not. I could estimate maybe 15.
You had approximately 15 lapses over an 8-month period?
Yes.
You also talked about, in July of 2016, entering into an intensive outpatient program in La Jolla.
Yes.
What was that program?
Practical recovery treatment program in La Jolla.
And how long was that program?
1 week.
And after your completion, and actually, I should ask you, did you successfully complete that program?
Yes.
And after successfully completing the program, did you drink?
Yes.
How many lapses did you have after completing that program, approximately?
Probably about 5.
And when you say lapser, are you talking about drinking wine?
Yes.
Are you talking about excessive drinking of wine?
Well, relative to my ideal of abstinence, certainly it was excessive. In regard to, passing out or that sort of thing, or doing anything that I might regret, such as drinking and driving, certainly not. It was at home, or at the wedding.
Approximately how many glasses of wine would you drink during these lapses?
Generally, it would be about 2 or 3 glasses of wine.
Were there instances or were there lapses when you had more than 3 glasses of wine?
I can't say for sure. I don't think so.
In your petition, you made reference to your relapse prevention plan, and that's on Exhibit 1, page 5. Question 5 in particular. And among the things that you discuss, I'll let you get to that page. Do you see question 5?
Yes.
Among the things that you discuss is your prioritization of your health and self-care, daily practices supporting your mental and physical well-being, and your use of smart recovery tools to manage potential triggers and urges. Do you see that?
Yes.
Does your relapse prevention plan also include therapy with Dr. Jagodia?
Yes.
Have you discussed specifically with Dr. Jagodia that if you were to be early terminated from probation, that you would continue therapy with her?
Yes.
And how frequently do you see her now?
Recently, it's been once a week, but generally, on average, bi-weekly in the last year and a half.
When was the last time that you saw Dr. Jagodia?
Last Saturday.
And does your relapse prevention plan also include continuing to attend SMART program meetings?
Yes.
When was the last time you attended a SMART meeting?
Thursday evening.
Last Thursday evening?
Yes.
And how frequently do you attend those meetings now?
Generally once a week.
Do you have a sponsor?
No.
Why not?
I guess the short answer is I don't feel that I need a sponsor. In Smart Recovery, I don't know anybody that does. It's generally part of a 12-step program. I have had a sponsor briefly back, long time ago, but that was for a brief while back after my after my stay at Hazelden.
Do you have any participants in SMART whom you can turn to for support should you need it?
Yes.
Who would that be?
Do I have to name names?
You know, actually, that's a good point. You don't have to. But about how many people would you say you have who are a support system for you in SMART?
I'd say at least 5.
And these individuals are regular attendees of SMART?
Yes.
Are they at the program facilitation level of SMART? In other words, are they program facilitators, or are they just attendees like you?
2 of them are facilitators.
And how long have you known the first facilitator?
Since I started attending SMART meetings in January of 2016.
And how about the other facilitator?
That facilitator was originally a participant, but he's been a participant for at least 2 years, weekly SMART recovery meeting that I went to.
So one you've known for about 2 years, the other one you've known for over 3 years.
That's right.
Did you ask them to submit a letter of support on your behalf?
No.
Did you ask any other SMART attendees to submit a letter of support on your behalf?
No.
Did you ask anybody to submit a letter of support on your behalf?
No.
In fact, your petition does not have any letters of support, correct?
No.
You say on page 2, on page 6, question 2, that question actually asks, what support systems do you have now in place to assist you in similar stressful situations? And your answer is, quote, friends or family are my primary sources of social support. Do you see that?
Yes.
Sir, did you think to ask friends or family to provide letters of support on your behalf to attest to your rehabilitation?
No.
My last question for you, sir, is if you refer to Exhibit 1, AGO 8. I'll represent to you that this is a therapy information sheet that was submitted for your petition by your therapist, Dr. Jagodia. Do you see that?
Yes.
I want you to hone in specifically on paragraph 9 of this therapy information sheet. And Dr. Jagodia states this, quote, continued probation adds stress and affects his quality of life, but does not add anything to the safety of his practice. Do you agree that continued probation adds stress and affects your quality of life?
Yes.
How so?
Well, I think it's a psychological stress. It's sort of being in limbo in regard, professionally. My work as a psychologist is a very important part of my life, and the fact that it's in jeopardy is psychologically very stressful. That my clients or potential clients are potentially privy to my status is of concern to me, in that I would not want to undermine their faith in my integrity and ability to be of good counsel to them. The fact that I had 3 violations, I think increased my stress considerably. To think that I allowed those to happen. Particularly until I got the determination in regard to the conclusion of those violations. While I was waiting, that was particularly stressful.
Do you agree with Dr. Jagodia's statement that continued probation, quote, does not add anything to the safety of your practice?
Yes, I agree.
Can you explain why you agree with that statement?
I am absolutely committed to sobriety. In fact, I put off applying for early termination, for petitioning, because I had a thought that perhaps if I applied immediately after I was eligible to do so, that it might sort of suggest that I'm eager, to be able to drink again, to not be monitored. I decided that if I waited a half year, and I thought it perhaps would be affirmation of what my feeling is, which is that the thought of my drinking again is really a painful thought. I have very occasionally I have dreams. Earlier on, I would say, in sobriety, I had occasional dreams that were sort of wish fulfillment dreams, thinking that I was going to have fun drinking and then doing so in a dream. In the past couple of years, it occurs to me that I rarely have dreams about drinking. But when I do, they're always anxiety dreams.
You continue to have those occasions where you will have those risk fulfillment dreams?
They're anxiety dreams. So what I mean by that is that I wake up and there's a sort of a relief that it was a dream. That even in the dream, it's about my God, I can't believe I drank. What happened? What did I do? When I wake up, I realize that's some sort of residual anxiety from the past, and I suppose exists on some level, but perhaps now. But I don't feel that I have anxiety about drinking or the possibility of drinking because I have gained so many positives in sobriety. I regret that I didn't sustain the sobriety that I had attained in 1999 because I deprived myself of of years of what has really been something that I feel very good. I feel strong in regard to my mental clarity. I'm sort of back to feeling much more connected to who I was before I started drinking. heavily in the 90s. I read a lot. I socialize with friends without drinking. I talk to my mother every day for an hour on the phone. I wouldn't want to be doing that drunk. Yeah, I have a lot of gratitude for sobriety. I'm calmer in sobriety. I know that I don't seem very calm now. But that is certainly what I feel most of the time.
I have no further questions. Sure. 1 to 10, correct, Your Honor.
Okay, all right, I'm going to go through these one by one. Dr. Whitaker, do you have any objections to my receiving into evidence these documents?
No.
Exhibits 1 through 10? Okay, and I note I'm going to place exhibits 8 and 9 under seal. All right, and with that, all the documents have been admitted, and I'm going to open it up to the board if they have any questions, and we'll start to my right. Are there any board members with any questions?
Good morning, Dr. Whitaker. It's
Good
still
morning.
morning, 2 more minutes. My question is with regards the petition for early termination, therapy information sheet on AGO 008, where it talked about the problems that were presented in therapy. How is your alcohol use related to the mental health problems that you presented in therapy?
I think that drinking and smoking cannabis was largely related to numbing pain of the past and pain of the present. Clearly, that I've came to realize more clearly than ever in the last 3 years. Relates to avoidance of pain. My primary strategy psychologically was healthy denial. Someone gave me a book in the 90s, in the early 90s, a friend of my father's. It was called Healthy Denial, and that's what I sort of took on, the concept of trying to stay in the present, not think about the future, and I think largely try not to think about painful things. And I think that, perhaps that was a survival strategy at the time. But the fact that it sort of generalized to a time when I no longer, I don't think it was ever functional or optimal, rather, to suppress my feelings in regard to grief or trauma or pain. But I think that I embrace pain now. It is certainly something that I would say is a different mindset than I've had in sobriety in the past 3 years than I had primarily before that. I think my concept of coping or mental health was overly about not, sort of a glass half full thinking, about trying to see things positive light, and ultimately, I believe that overly, it's a cognitive therapy kind of approach, but I feel that it was over-intellectualized. It's not just about thinking, it's about being connected with how I feel, which meant that I had to really learn to embrace pain much more than I had been. And so I'm I really, I sort of reviewed these reports, and I was actually, I didn't remember talking all that much. She says early on in the earlier quarterly reports that I talked about cravings, and maybe that's about, I suppose I did, but it's interesting. I don't know. I feel like it feels sort of a distant memory that to have talked about cravings in therapy, or to have felt cravings, because I really haven't. So my sense is certainly that my therapy now doesn't really involve cravings. It involves talking about primarily the benefits of sobriety, including the pain. Having greater access to hard, difficult emotions, which feels. It helps me be at peace with myself, that I'm much less apt to think that my overall priority is to have to feel good at all times. Obviously, I aspire to feel good, but I also believe I accept that at times, I'm sad. I'm frustrated with. I'm very happy that since November of 2016, I've been sober. I don't think the political climate would have been easy to process with alcohol, or other things that are very painful, like thinking about climate change and such. I think there's a good and healthy reason to be, worried at times, sad at times, frustrated at times. And I think I aspire or sort of feel that maybe peace of mind is more of a priority for me than needing to feel up or feel down.
Mm-hmm. So it seems like you previously self-medicated with alcohol and other substances to kind of like numb you and make you feel better. But since your probation, you've found more positive or more adaptive and ways to cope. And my question is, if you're off probation and you're not mandated to stay sober, what plan do you have when there's like stressor that you have, and with the political climate, as you've mentioned, and the climate change, what plan do you have to not resort to your old ways of self-medicating, given like the stressors and some of the mental health problems that you sometimes have to deal with?
Well, self-care, I think the function of substances largely was to comfort myself and, what's been described as a kind of chemical illusion of connection. And I think those are the two things that I look for and seek if I'm in distress. Sources of comfort for myself, and that includes, meditation, it includes yoga, it includes hiking. I go hiking with a good friend fairly frequently. We go to the gym together. I take French lessons. I have a French teacher. I'm fluent in French, but I'm in sobriety, sort of aiming for bilingualism at this point. So one of the things I enjoy doing is just having French lessons. So I do that on a very frequent basis for an hour several times a week. I read. I call family and friends, or we get together. I plan to, when I get off probation, go to more meetings. I certainly would go to a meeting if I had any craving or urge to drink, including AA meetings. I have been to a lot of AA meetings in my life, and one thing that I really appreciate about AA is that there are more meetings. They're available. If I had an urge to drink, if I would go to a recovery meeting, whether it would be a SMART meeting or an AA meeting, it would be whatever meeting I could go to that would be available for me to go to. And I would continue to go sort of on a much more regular basis. I'm actually, whenever I do get off probation, I have already planned to go several times a week, irregardless of having any kind of urge to drink. I've spoken about this in meetings. I've used the analogy of when I'm off probation, it'll be like losing training wheels, and ultimately I am very eager to lose training wheels, to sort of know and be confident. I am confident, but I don't think that absolute confidence comes without actual implementation of not needing any kind of external constraint to maintain sobriety. So I'm excited to experience that. I'm proud of my sobriety. I sense that, I'll be particularly proud that I can do it off of probation. So I will have a more frequent connection with meetings, and I'm looking forward to that.
And just like one last question, aside from the lessening of the stress that staying on probation will, the alleviation of the stress of being on probation. Why do you want to be off probation early?
Well, it's expensive being on probation. I'm 60 years old. I do not have enough money to retire by any stretch of the imagination. I can put 25%, I would potentially be able to put 25% of my income into retirement, tax-free. At my age, I would like to do so. That's one thing that I would like to be able to do. Pretty much everything I can think of offhand is stressful in some fashion. So when you say apart from stress, I guess, I would reiterate what I was saying about pride, I understand that, pride is not necessarily a word that's, it has maybe a double edge to it. But what I mean is, a sense of accomplishment in sobriety that I already have. But that I have envisioned, 4 years, 5 years, 10 years of sobriety, and it's exciting to me. I certainly didn't expect to sort of be so choked up today, but I think it does speak to. It's actually an excitement. It's a joyful feeling. I think I'll just feel that much more joyful about sobriety when I'm not needing the training wheels of probation.
Thank you, Dr. Whitaker.
Okay, any other board members have questions? Okay.
I just have one question for you, Dr. Whitaker. You listed your sobriety date as October 8th,
Yes.
2016. What was it, because you had tried before, had periods before of abstinence, what was it that, it's more than 32 months now, I think it was 32 months when you sent in your application, your petition. What do you think helped you turn that corner this far?
Turn the corner towards commitment, towards abstinence, and absolute certainty about it. It's hard to sort of say any given thing. It's sort of a confluence of experience over 3 years. I was, I have this desire to look at the glass half full generally, and so early on I was happy that I didn't have any kind of physical withdrawal from alcohol. I very soon just felt physically better. I started to lose weight. I started to have more energy. I noticed that I was sleeping better. I noticed a clarity of my thinking. which I wasn't really aware of, that that drinking was affecting my thinking, but I guess I would describe it as a kind of sharpness, that my mind would sort of operate in a kind of much more creative and sort of free-flowing way. In my work as a therapist, I have felt more grounded as a therapist. One of the ego dystonic nature of having an addiction and sort of continuing to drink is that I never felt entirely in integrity in regard to counseling people, particularly about their addiction. I knew a lot about addiction. I'd been to Hazelden, which is one of the premier residential treatment programs. I had thought about addiction. I had been to a lot of AA meetings. I knew what to say to clients, I thought, to be sober and to say those things to my clients with addictions, it just feels more in integrity, which feels good. and I think ultimately is conveyed to my clients. I don't necessarily disclose, well, I disclose to some, but not to most of my clients, my addiction history or being in sobriety now. With a few, I do. But I think my style I think anyone could infer, I imagine, in the transference that, I speak from somebody who probably knows a lot about addiction and may well have personal experience. And I believe that I can speak to people with addiction, I know that I speak with them in a way that's helpful to them.
Okay. Any further questions?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Dr. Whitaker, were you aware that you could submit support letters in your application?
It didn't really occur to me, no.
So you are aware that you could submit support letters?
I didn't think about either being able to or not. I just didn't. I was not aware, no. I mean, it's not that I thought that I couldn't,
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. With regard to I believe it's on AGO 6. Oh, I apologize. AGO 8. It says here that you began therapy in May 2014. Is that correct?
Yes.
So between May 2014 through October 2016, were there discussions about your sobriety or maintaining sobriety?
Yes.
Could you turn to page AGO 232?
What exhibit? 9. Exhibit 9?
Yes. The last line on AGO 232 in Exhibit 6, you said that the transcript here, or the report says that, quote, he said his therapist is not a proponent of AA, unquote. You had mentioned in your response to Dr. Kusuga that you might be interested in undertaking additional AA meetings.
Yes.
On the same page, you also said that, quote, he reiterated that he does not feel that AA is a helpful context for me that I've been exposed to. Could you reconcile for us how you would fit in those AA meetings within both a therapy that doesn't support AA and previous comments?
You know, I obviously I can't hear the transcript to know if I said that in those terms. If I did say it exactly in that way, I'm sort of surprised because it's not really how I feel or felt. My thinking at the time was that I preferred SMART recovery meetings to AA meetings. I would certainly not, and I don't think my thinking at the time was not that AA wasn't helpful. I found a lot of AA helpful. I'm grateful for AA. And I happily go to AA meetings when I can't go to SMART meetings, like when I'm traveling and such. I really enjoy going to AA meetings. I think the point I was making, perhaps I was predicting that there was going to be a recommendation in regard to attending AA meetings if I were put on probation, and I was, I think, laying the groundwork for what I have found to be a modality that I prefer. I like crosstalk, for example, that is allowed in SMART recovery. Spilling my guts and then hearing silence is sort of a little unnerving to me. I kind of like the fact that in SMART recovery meetings, if I talk about something and, you know, that people are always very supportive in a sort of immediate way, I like that. Anyway, I don't need to go into that, but I very much respect AA. My father would not have been sober, I don't believe, without AA. Hazelden, to me, was a wonderful experience. So, yeah.
One final question. You referenced that your visits are part of your support system for, your therapy visits are part of your support system for maintaining sobriety. How is this current time different from the period of May 2014 to October 2016?
Well, I think the most compelling thing in convincement around sobriety and the absolute essential value of it is having experienced it. And, you know, it speaks to that ambivalence again, you know. Intellectually, you know, I understood as a psychologist, as somebody who had been to Hazelden, who had been to a lot of AA meetings, I understood intellectually, I think largely the value. But I was clearly in a lot of denial. So having experienced feeling so much better on every level, you know, I'm sort of looking towards, you know, what someone would refer to as the third chapter, the third act of my life. You know, I turned 60 this year. You know, I feel very happy that I'm not and will not poison my body anymore. My brain. Anyway, yeah. So, I'm sorry. That's it.
Thank you, Dr. Whitaker.
Okay, any further questions?
Yes. Dr. Whitaker, I don't know if I've heard you identify yourself as an alcoholic. Are you an alcoholic?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? No? Yes.
Thank you. I am trying to, there were several times, and I'm sorry I can't find them, where you had raised objections to AA, saying that you disagreed with the abstinence model, and also the idea of having to have a sobriety date and having to start over if you indulged in substances. And I want to understand, and I understand Smart Recovery. I know they can integrate a 12-step model, but in general, the idea is you can learn to use substances in a way that is not problematic. And I'm trying to understand maybe what was your own internal process of beginning to accept an AA model, as you've shared with us today, since you had some objections to it, some strong objections in the beginning.
Yeah, I recall after that psychiatric evaluation with Dr. Ornish, thinking, I can't believe I said those things, And again, I think it reflects the kind of ambivalence or almost too split mind kind of quality. Because I realized that I seemed to suggest, or maybe I did suggest, that that I didn't think abstinence was a good idea, or that I didn't believe in it, or that Smart Recovery wasn't an abstinence model, and none of those things are true. And so I felt that I really didn't articulate very well at all, and I regretted having said that. I think what I was driving at, not very, I didn't express it very well, but what I was driving at was more related to the counting of the days. The absolute abstinence being the marker of success in an absolute sort of black and white way, and that at least my sense was that in needing to declare, if there was a lapse, 0 days of sobriety or 1 or 2 days of sobriety at the next meeting, that potentially could be, for some, an obstacle to returning to meetings, almost a shaming of sorts. I think it is true. I mean, I've heard of stories of people who felt that they couldn't go back because they didn't want to have to declare that they were that they had slipped or relapsed, and so I understand that that's not the main emphasis. That certainly relapse and slipping is a common thing, and that there are lots of people who go back to AA and do it without shame after having relapsed. But I do like the fact that, and maybe it relates to smart talk as well, smart talk, cross talk, that generally when people in a Smart Recovery meeting say, you know, I slipped, I relapsed, people will respond with an attitude of compassion and encouragement to recommit and to get back to sobriety. And I think that's a very important message for people to hear. And I just feel that process to me was very encouraging when in 2016 I continued to drink off and on, and I was attempting sobriety, but did have several lapses, and I could go to a meeting and say this happened, and I never felt that it sort of brought me down a notch in regard to how people felt about me or their desire to support my recovery. It was always just a very supportive feedback.
In that regard, can I ask you one more question?
Mm-hmm.
So now, when you're in social situations, you mentioned that you're doing more socializing.
Mm-hmm.
How do you handle that when other people are drinking alcohol? What comes up for you, and what are the challenges you face in those situations?
You know, it really has not felt all that challenging. I frankly, one thing that I seem to feel almost every time when I'm around a lot of people drinking is, God, I'm glad I'm not drunk. It's sort of, when I was drinking, I don't think I thought about inebriation as being an odd state. I just thought it was fun, and I was funnier, and so I don't really mind being in situations where people are drinking, and I feel like I have fun. Everybody's having fun, and to me, it's kind of more fun to know that I'm entirely present and I'm not going to say anything stupid. You know, that I'm entirely, you know, I'm more contained or within myself. I'm more aware. And so I think I have more fun without alcohol.
Thank you.
Any further questions? All right, if there are no further questions, then I'll allow Ms. Luzon to have a closing statement, and then Dr. Whitaker, you can have a closing as well, okay?
For today's petition, the prevailing consideration is whether or not the petitioner is rehabilitated. We know that. And we also know from the guidance of the disciplinary guidelines that one of the factors is that there is a, quote, track record of reliable, responsible, and consistently appropriate conduct. We need that because the board needs to be assured that the public will be safe. It's petitioner's burden to make this demonstration. It's a high burden, and he's got to demonstrate it clearly and convincingly. I would submit that based on what we've heard today and what the exhibits in the record, that the petitioner has not met this high burden. Yes, there are troubling issues of his probation compliance, the probation violations that we've spoken about today, and his disclosures of those probation violations in his quarterly reports. Those are problematic. But what I would submit is even more troubling is the issue of whether or not he's fully rehabilitated from his underlying alcohol problems. The evidence before us doesn't rise to the level of clear and convincing. There's big gaps. So outside of probation, we simply have no evidence of sustained sobriety. To the contrary, what we know is that after his first DUI, after his second DUI, he continued to drink. We know that after his first DUI in 1999, he was sober for 7 months, but since then, and up to his probation now, he continued to drink. We also know that his sobriety date is October 8, 2016, and the period of time that's contemporaneous to that sobriety date is the remainder of 2016. And what we know, based on today, is that he had 15 lapses where he drank alcohol. That includes him drinking alcohol after he attended an intensive outpatient program for 1 week. We also know that during the course of his therapy with Dr. Jagodia, who was an instrumental part of his relapse prevention plan, he says that while he was undergoing treatment with her, he was still actively drinking. We know that while he was on criminal probation after a second DUI, he continued to drink. And we know when he was going to AA as part of that criminal probation, he was still drinking. I do not want to minimize or diminish the efforts that he has made since October 8th, 2016. In fact, what we know is this, that setting aside his probation violations, the probation mechanism appears to be working for the petitioner. He's different now than when he was before probation. But that does not mean that there are grounds that rise to the level of clear and convincing that we should end the probation mechanism now. It works for him. She should continue in it until such time that he is fully demonstrated that he's rehabilitated. So taking into account the totality of facts presented today in the petition and the exhibits before the court, it would be the AGO's recommendation that the petition be denied.
Okay. All right. Dr. Whitaker, your opportunity for a closing statement.
I do believe, I do know that I will remain sober whenever the petition is granted, or regardless of whether the petition is granted. Whenever it's not the primary, it's not the determinant of whether I will begin to drink again. I can't imagine drinking again, so I disagree with the concept that if I were to be granted early termination at this point, that would have anything to do with my continued sobriety. The 15 lapses, maybe I misunderstood the question, but I thought I was responding to a question of in 2016, after my evaluation with Dr. Ornish, how many times did I lapse? So I thought I had said that it was 5 times between the treatment program and the probation, the beginning of probation. I'm not indicating that any number of lapses was desirable. I do concede that I was not fully committed in the way that I needed to be in that period, and that probation ultimately has been the kind of training wheels of sobriety. However, in regard to my misstatements, on my quarterly reports, I consistently answered incorrectly to the question of whether I had complied. And I did not understand. I see that was negligent on my part to not understand or to sort of think about the meaning of that question sufficiently enough, because as I see it, clearly I had, and that the correct answer that I hadn't complied. I suppose in my thinking, having the fact that my violations were known and that I compensated, I paid the fine and such. I suppose in my mind that was cooperating compliance. I was being compliant with the repercussions of my violations. But I understand that I misunderstood, and in retrospect, I clearly should not have misunderstood that question. But I certainly did not intend to try to pretend that those violations didn't occur. I know that everybody, that the probation department was aware that those violations occurred. And somehow in my mind, that affected my answer in the sense that, well, this is a non-compliance that's understood. And so in that sense, there's nothing else that I need to declare around non-compliance. But I indeed did not properly answer those questions, and I regret that. I sincerely and adamantly believe that I am ready to be off probation. I thank God every day for my sobriety, and I'd rather drink mud than drink a glass of alcohol. I don't need to be on probation to feel that. As I said, I would like to be free of some of the stressors of being on probation, but I certainly will accept the decision of the board, and I will maintain sobriety no matter what.
Thank you, Dr. Whitaker. Let me give you some information as to how this is going to proceed from this point. In just a minute, the record will be closed. At that point, at some point later today, the board will meet in closed session to deliberate, and at that point, we will have 30 days with which to provide you with the decision of the board. And with that, I want to thank you for your time and effort, and the matter is submitted and the record is closed.
Thank you.
And if you'll hold on for just a second, I'll get you a copy of the court reporter form, so if you need to get a copy of the transcript for any reason.
So we did spend a little bit longer on that hearing than we anticipated relative to the agenda. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take our lunch break now. It's 1:45. There is a hearing at 1:30, but 1:45, excuse me. We should be back by 1:45, because I don't think it's really realistic to expect people to get their lunch in 45 minutes. So if the petitioner on the next matter could be informed of that, that would be helpful. We'll take the closed session material for both this case and that case at the end of the day.
Do you want to go? Yeah. I'm going to order it now.